So to kick off this summit, I'm pleased to be introducing our first keynote speaker, Major General William T. Cooley. Major General Cooley is the Special Assistant to the Commander of Air Force Materiel Command. He is the leader of the digital campaign for AFMC. In a sense, he is our digital dignitary. General Cooley is advancing the digital enterprise throughout AFMC's 6 centers. Major General Cooley is uniquely qualified to serve in this capacity through his variety of technical, management, leadership, and staff positions, including command at the group, wing, and center level. A small sample of his assignments include Commander of AFRL, Program Executive for Program Integration at the Missile Defense Agency. He's also been the Director of GPS at the Space and Missile Systems Center, the Commander of the Phillips Research Site, and Director for Space Vehicles at AFRL. As you can tell, there are few, if any, more suited to be in the pole position for this year's WITS. So it is indeed my pleasure to welcome Major General Cooley to the virtual stage.
Hey, thanks, Tim. I appreciate the very kind introduction. I always get a little bit, I don't know, embarrassed when you start set high expectations with that kind of an introduction. I will focus on what I've prepared versus try and achieve, spend my time focusing on that. First of all, let me just say thank you to Dave Dodds for his leadership in putting this together. Thanks to Tim Meixner. He asked me to kick this off. Tim is part of the digital campaign within AFMC, and so he is well versed in the activities, which I think is what motivated him to say, hey, we've got to get this information out and share it broadly, because this is about an ecosystem maturing as we go forward. I'd also like to add my thanks to Yvonne Vermillion, who helped ensure that I could get set up for this and everything. Terrific work, especially in this very strange year that we're all experiencing during COVID and learning how to work from home. As you can see, I'm in my home right now. Haven't been in the office really in months, other than to pick up a few things. But we have all learned to shift over and use tools differently, which I think actually has been a very helpful for us to become more digital and accepting of bringing in new tools and doing work differently. Let me start off. I guess I'm an amateur historian. Most officers in the military, you have to look back on history and understand this. And I know some of you have probably heard me talk about this. I'm a big, I'll say World War I fan is not the right word. I'm very interested in it. I've been fascinated since I was stationed in Germany. And I think that World War I really, I'm getting some feedback. I don't know if this, thank you. World War I, more than any other time period that I can think of, really represents how important technology is to the battlefield, and how the speed at which you deploy and the ways in which you deploy those new technologies is decisive on the battlefield. I won't go through my talk with respect to. I like the Battle of Cambrai, which was really the first time in which tanks were used in mass and employed in a meaningful way. But we can think of lots of examples in which technology used at the edge. I like the theme of this conference: technology at the edge can be decisive. What we see is that it's, as I mentioned in Cambrai, the speed of development and our confidence in that development has never been more crucial. We have all sorts of pressures, and we observe in the commercial space that first to market, makes a huge difference. And that's true also in the military when it comes to military technologies. We've got to be able to develop technologies and systems quickly, and we've got to have confidence in how those technologies will work, and that they will work as we intend. The other aspect of this is thinking through how to employ them. All of those are enormous challenges. We could spend a lot of time looking at history and thinking about how there were missteps when technology was initially employed, and it took time to figure out the best way to employ those technologies. And I think that really becomes the framework in my mind as to how we think about this thing we call the digital engineering and the digital campaign and becoming a digital force. It's about using these tools to accelerate that development, to build confidence in that development, and to think through how we're going to employ those. And there's nothing different relative to the basic fundamentals of sort of developing technology and those kind of things. What is different is the speed and the tools by which we can bring to bear. And this is a case, in my view, in which it really has fundamentally changed the way in which we can search the space of technology and advance our confidence in that and think through how to deploy technology in such a rapid fashion relative to, I'll say, stubby pencil approaches of the past, that it does fundamentally change the game. When we start thinking about potential peer or near peer adversaries, it's absolutely essential that we introduce these agile and high speed processes and tools, or we're going to lose. The Chief of Staff, General Brown, has come out swinging. His message is accelerate or lose, and I think he's absolutely right. From everything that I have seen, the potential peers and near peers are moving as rapidly as they possibly can. They also recognize the importance of technology, and so that puts a premium on everything that we're doing in this digital campaign that I'm going to talk about to ensure we have the agility, we can flesh out the trade space within technologies, and build confidence in the systems and think through how we're going to employ those. One final comment before I sort of get into the more details of the digital campaign, if you will. And I've been thinking about this for a while, that there really are two branches in this, in this discussion in terms of system development. One we are, I'll say, pretty comfortable with. That's called the hardware side, the hardware branch, if you will. Obviously, the other side is the software branch. And I think there's a debate and a discussion, a tension between which is going to be more important, which is going to be dominant, and where we should be focusing our attention. I think anyone who tells you the answer, well, I don't believe we know the answer to that yet. At the end of the day, maybe I'm a war call, spent too much time in war college thinking about these things. It's about boots on the ground. Conflict is, sort of a disciplined, controlled violence in which you can impose your political will on a potential adversary. It may be possible to bring about that leverage through strictly software. That remains to be seen. We all can think of examples in which that plays out. But hardware is always going to be a part of the needs, the systems, in the hardware systems that we use to be a military, to act like a military, and to impose our will on potential adversaries. But as you think about that framework, if you will, um, the hardware camp, we know that very well in terms of aircraft and engine development, and the technology continues to evolve. I would argue that the digital campaign, all things that we're doing digital, is extremely applicable in terms of a model-based systems engineering, in terms of thinking through how various platforms and capabilities would play out, and how we might employ them, and building confidence by, in effect, putting the hardware model in a system to ring out and build confidence in its performance. So there clearly is applicability on the hardware side. On the software side, um, in fact, I will talk a little bit about Dr. Roper's digital trinity. I think that the software side, I shouldn't say is an unknown, but it's different, and for some, it's challenging to sort of think through what matters. How are we going to quickly mature software capabilities, if you will? I think we have some great examples. Our, iPhone, or smartphones, and systems that are constantly pushing out software updates. Uh, that's a different model on the speed at which they are able to push out updates, whether it's a security update or additional features. I think all of those apply to what we see coming for military systems. And that's a different mindset, very different mindset, that our current DoD processes are not nimble at, and prepared to absorb. So we're looking at that. But there's two fundamental key differences. And we've got to do both. The truth is, we've absolutely got to do both. On the software side, there's the agile software development, and Scrums, and Kubernetes, and all these other terms that, frankly, I'm learning as we go. I imagine many of you are also coming up the learning curve on these software terms. What do they mean, and how do we incorporate them into system development? Okay, let me shift gears. I am anxious to get to the Q&A, because I think that that's where we'll probably learn the most. Let me talk a little bit about the digital campaign. The title of this talk was Digital Campaign Overview, so I would be remiss if I didn't touch on that. Many of you probably saw the industry exchange day that we had a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Roper, with General Bunch, to expose some of the details of what we're doing. And I will, knowing that, I will go quickly through this. But with respect to the lines of effort, there are 6 lines of effort that we identified. And this was really back in about 6 months ago. In early March, we looked at, okay, this is not a min viable product. This is not a couple of quick wins and call it done. This is about transforming the enterprise. And all of you are well aware of the Air Force enterprise. It's an enormous enterprise, all the way from the Air Force Research Laboratory, sort of fundamental physics, identification, to system development, to the test community, to the sustainment community, to include our installation management, the infrastructure that we have. And that's just going out to that life cycle, the sustainment, the tail end life cycle. Right now, many of our systems are in that sustainment phase. When you think about the existing fleet, and much of the expense that the Air Force has is going to sustain those, whether it's the parts and all the sustainment. Some of it's contractor sustained, much of it is government sustained in our depots. Today, you can go to those depots and you can find some very savvy digital capabilities with sort of iPad, quickly able to pull up 3D drawings and the like. Unfortunately, those are sort of in that min viable product demonstration phase. There, you can also go to shops and still see, I'll call it stubby pencil types of activity. That might be a slight overreach, but it's not far off from where we are. So we have this maturation of, in terms of moving forward, that varies greatly. The challenge that we have tried to strap on relative to this digital campaign that General Bunch initiated is the OT&E, the organized, train, and equip aspect, to say we've got to move the entire enterprise forward and bring those capabilities and think about it like an enterprise. As I hinted at, one of the things we've discovered is there are islands of goodness all across the Air Force and working with our industry partners. And so much of what we have done and spent time and energy doing is to pull the thread and ensure that we expose the good practices, best practices that are out there. So the lines of effort, are really focused on that enterprise, so it's all encompassing. And fortunately, I haven't had anybody tell me, "Oh, we missed something." Because if anything, we've probably put too many rocks in our rucksack, to use sort of an Army term. But the line of effort 0 is about infrastructure, trying not to duplicate what's already ongoing within the Air Force, but to ensure that the infrastructure that we build out, the IT infrastructure that we build out, will meet the needs of this digital acquisition processes that we're moving towards. Huge undertaking. Line of effort 1 line of effort 0 is led by Mr. Rich Cutter. Line of effort 1 is led by Mr. Tom Lockhart, and his focus has been, what are those tools that the enterprise needs? And when we say the enterprise, we're talking about largely the government side. I'll talk to in Dr. Roper's comments, we're moving towards the tech stack, to owning the tech stack. And in the case of GBSD, that makes great sense. We're going to have to think through, I know Dr. Roper has sort of elaborated a little bit, we're going to have to think through exactly what those relationships are and what it means to own the tech stack as we go forward. But what are those tools, and what's the environment, the digital environment in which our folks can work? So that's line of effort 1. Line of effort 2 is the data standards and architecture. One of the absolutely essential things that actually one of the elements of the digital trinity is using standards, leveraging standards and architectures to enable flexibility and agility as we go forward. And so Mr. Mitch Miller is leading that. The standards, to be candid, we are relying heavily. We're not writing new standards. We're looking to cooperate with industry to identify what are those standards and how can we deploy them smartly within systems. But we're really trying to ensure that the architectures that we build out will marry up, and that we can utilize those standards. And then the other aspect is data. And as many of you know, we have a chief data officer in the Air Force spending a lot of time thinking through, how do we manage all of the acquisition sustainment data? What does it mean to make that visible and expose that and authoritative, write it once and use it many times? We intuitively understand what that means, but making that happen and implementing it is really the focus of what we're trying to do in the digital campaign, and leveraging what the A4 community has done to great extent. They've made a lot of progress on that, and we are in the process of leveraging that. Line of effort 3, led by Mr. Lanson Conley, is all about the processes, changing of processes to go faster. Some of them are maybe obvious when we do, is it possible to not do a PDR or a CDR that involves printing out reams of PowerPoint slides? Is it possible to do this strictly in a model? We've seen exemplars in which that that gives us hope to move in that direction. But if we're going to change the nature of the review process and make it more iterative and more collaborative with industry, which is where we hope to go, that's going to take some thinking through as to how we're going to ensure we maintain the rigor and end up with a system that we have confidence in. But that's where the focus is. The other aspect of the line of effort 3, Mr. Connolly, really ties directly to one of the digital trinity aspects that Dr. Roper talks about, and that is the DevSecOps or DevStarOps. And what that means is development, going from development to operations, there's usually some sort of a security or safety review process before you start strapping things on an airplane or deploying software, for example. The question is how do we structure the development such that that certification is assured, whether it's airworthiness or cybersecurity, and there are processes and techniques to do that, but we have a long way to go before we actually have those things broadly deployed. So that's another important effort. Line of effort 4 is the policy and guidance, and that's really been a supporting thing to ask the question, do we need to change the policy, and if so, where and how? And obviously, we're working very closely with the headquarters with SAF-AQ to do that. We're really looking at, are there hindrances, but then we need to lean in and figure out what we're going to change. And then the last line of effort that we identified is the all-important workforce and culture. Ms. Jackie Janning Lask is leading that effort. I forgot to mention Mr. Tom Doyen is leading the policy and guidance. He's the lead lawyer. But in line of effort 5, Ms. Jackie Janning Lask is leading that. It's an enormous undertaking to figure out how do we train the workforce and how do we shift the culture that people feel comfortable moving out in this, because this is about having confidence in these new processes and feeling comfortable enough to use them and employ them and understand what this looks like. In fact, I just did a deep dive review with them yesterday. They're making some very good progress in terms of identifying the training that is available and figuring out what are those key what's required for each of the different functional groups, if you will, for a engineer or a financial manager or a program manager. There ought to be a basis of learning and understanding to make things digital, and they're in the process of defining that, leveraging some good work that the Navy has done in that case. So those are the lines of effort, and I'm happy to take questions. What I will say is what we've discovered in this is there are islands of goodness all across the AFMC and all across the Air Force. And I would be very much remiss if I didn't give a shout out to SMC in a big way. This has not just been AFMC. We recognize this is a large enterprise, and everything has got to work and integrate together smartly. And so SMC has been a part of that discussion and part of the integrated within the team. Let me now reframe this a little bit. So fortunately, we're really pleased that Dr. Roper has articulated his vision for where the digital engineering needs to move. And I've already talked about that, but just so everyone, in the interest of completeness, the digital trinity he's articulated is, first of all, create before you aviate. And in many ways, it's a terrific vision. He talks about the Formula One as an example of going out and using a model, having such a confidence in a model, in the system model, that you can make changes to it, run the test in a simulated environment, and enough times with sufficient rigor that then you can have confidence, say, yep, let's go build this part and put it on the car and you're off to the races, quite literally. That same thinking is where we need to get to relative to the system modeling and performance and confidence in our ability to understand the performance and trades. Because in many ways, back to the theme of this conference, this is going to enable that technology at the edge to bring that forward. So many of you will say, well, that's just hearing, and that's true, but I think that that there's more to it than that, because it really is fleshing out the performance of a system and thinking through how you're going to deploy that. The second element of his trinity is agile software, and the sort of the agile software development. I know you have Mr. Nick Shalon's going to talk about that. He's much smarter on this than I am. But I think that this is absolutely essential to that software aspect, to deploy software much more rapidly, and use the tools and techniques in a digital way. And we see great examples of that with software factories and whatnot. The last element of his digital trinity I've mentioned, that is the open standards. We've got to leverage open standards, and that's going to accelerate development, accelerate technology. The other aspect, and I'll just put this out here for your thinking, is when we talk about open standards, the question that the government asks and the question that industry needs to ask themselves is, okay, how can you bring your intellectual property, your competitive advantage, and to the table so that the national security enterprise can benefit from that, but not, sacrifice that, if you will, in a standards, by us forcing a particular architecture onto the system. Candidly, that's a challenge. There's no simple answer. We've got to think that through. But I will tell you, the Air Force is very much committed to moving towards these standards-based, architecture-based development. And so we want to work with industry to ensure that we can have both, that we can have that architecture framework and give us the flexibility, but also ensure that industry has opportunities to bring their the intellectual property and competitive advantage to bear. Okay, let me wrap up with my ask of you, and then I'm happy to take questions. My ask of you, it just turned out this way. There's 3 L's. The first thing is lean in. This is an enormous ecosystem. It's going to take years to really shift gears to where I'm a little bit of a crawl, walk, run guy. We're in the crawl, early walk stage, depending on where you measure. But we've got to get to that run stage quickly. It's going to take time to get this deployed across the enterprise and realize the benefits that we know are out there. But it's going to require all of us to lean in and embrace this. The second L is learn. Like me, probably many of you, grew up doing Fortran 77 and some of these things, and so we have basic understanding of some of these things and done some, modeling and a finite element modeling and those types of things. But there are tremendous tools that now exist that allow us to go fast. Using standards, SML. There are new standards that are coming, LML. I don't know anything about these things. I'm learning. I would encourage all of you to lean in and learn. And the last L is leverage. We hope to leverage the smartness and the goodness from industry, but we also hope that you will leverage the activities that we're undergoing and the activities we're focusing on, some of that architecture and standards-based development. It's going to take a dialogue, but by leveraging one another, I think we're going to be able to make significant progress a lot faster. This is an ecosystem. This is a national security issue. We're all in this together. This is about whether or not we can shift our system, shift our thinking, mature our culture into this new digital age faster than potential adversaries, and maintain the agile development and the technological edge that we've come to know and appreciate and so value in our system. So with that, let me pause. I'm not sure how we're doing on time. I'll let the moderator folks control that, but I would welcome the opportunity to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, General Cooley. I really appreciate the words. I am monitoring questions as we go through your presentation, and we have one here that, as you talk through your words, sir, what do you feel is the greatest opportunity or challenge to the Air Force or AFMC as you link the acquisition digital enterprise to the sustainment digital enterprise? Because as some of the folks have mentioned, there may be a technical gap in that process.
No, that is a great question. And my mind initially goes to the product lifecycle management tools and the tool set and sort of the idea associated with product lifecycle management. So the PLM is in some sense that connection of, okay, what was developed, the drawings, the specifications, and all those kinds of things, and getting it into the hands of the sustainment community so that they have easy access to that. They can very quickly identify, okay, what are the parts and vendors and needs, if you will, to continue to sustain the weapon systems that we have. So in terms of what's the toughest challenge, I'm going to answer this. I was on a talk the other day. It's culture. I think culture is the toughest challenge that we have. And that may be the key friction point that you just highlighted. That the handoff from development, sort of the LCMC, if you will, into this more sustainment posture, whether it's a sustainment center or not. We have existing systems and ways in which we do things, and shifting gears with a culture and getting buy-in for doing things differently and getting people comfortable with that and embracing this new approach. I think that's going to be the toughest challenge, and that's going to take time. But we are definitely on a path to expose this data, and I'm very careful. I don't want to over promise. I'm sort of an under promise, over deliver individual to the extent that I can be. I don't want to over promise because right now, I think the workforce is saying, okay, show me. And we're in the process of rolling some of these capabilities out, trying to give some examples, and we're working on early wins, but it's going to take time for the full buy-in and that culture shift.
All right, sir, thank you for that. We also got a question on the General Brown in his accelerate or lose mantra, kind of continuing with that theme. What can our industry partners do to help the acceleration process, and what kind of ask do you have from a novel acquisition approach that they could maybe enter into, or what kind of contracting approaches would you offer up that maybe we could take advantage of that acceleration?
No, that's a great question. I honestly would go back to the 3 L's that I give you. Lean into it, learn, and leverage. But the other aspect that I would maybe add into this in terms of the contracting and those kinds of things, our contracting workforce and the thought behind it, they have just done remarkable thinking and working, and there's a lot of flexibility that already exists to think that through. That said, if there are ideas and initiatives and other approaches that we should be thinking about and considering to go fast to achieve this goal of accelerate or lose, then we're all ears. We definitely want to hear about it, and that's one of the reasons why we have a team that is sort of opening the aperture for policy and considering different approaches to address this. I'll just mention one other thing. There's as you can probably imagine, there's a lot of activity within the digital campaign. Two things that I didn't mention that I just wanted to hit on that you prompted me in that. One is metrics. We know that to change the culture, clearly identifying metrics that we can measure our progress and understand how mature are we moving, where are we on this journey, will help leadership and help the workforce to understand what's ahead of us. And so we are leveraging in COSI metrics. I don't want to make up new metrics. We're going to use what the industry standard is. Now we're modifying may be an overstatement. We're trying to extract the metrics that are meaningful for government program office and government, types of work. So metrics is one thing. Your question prompted me to think about contracts. We are looking at, and this was mentioned at the industry exchange. What are the features of being a digital program, and what are the types of, how do we put those on contract in a way that gets us where we need to go? And there's a team, part of the LOE3 team has been looking at those features, and they've actually scoured various programs to identify some of the digital features. There's 23 digital features that they've identified, used across various programs. We intend to share those with the industry. We expect probably in the next, I think they said 2 to 3 weeks is what I hope they're going to publish this list of 23 contract or digital features, if you will, on BetaSAM, and then we're going to look to get feedback from industry as we think this through. And there's nothing magic about 23. If we're missing something, let us know. This is a journey in which we are all willing to learn and move forward as we try and transform our enterprise to become more digital and really just more about being fast.
Okay, sir, thank you for that. We did get another question specifically around the digital stack or the tech stack that you'd mentioned in some of your comments. There's a question on who would actually own the tech stack. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and frankly, we knew that this is going to be a discussion point, I'll say, between government and industry. It is very clear that Dr. Roper is in the camp of he would like to see the government own the tech stack, and there's a whole host of reasons for that in terms of flexibility going forward and those kinds of things. That said, he also knows that the answer to the hard questions at Defense Acquisition University is it depends. Virtually every program has unique aspects and features that one needs to think through. In the case of GBSD, which is, I think, I don't want to say what's driving Dr. Roper, but that's one of the exemplars that is highlighted of the government owning the tech stack. That is there's obvious good reasons for that approach. But we can all probably imagine cases in which there's got to be a different, either a hybrid model, or perhaps where the contractor is something that's purely contractor owned. That's not where Dr. Roper wants to go. I think long term we certainly want to move towards government owning the tech stack, but we also are very much aware that the IT infrastructure on the government side has got to mature and move out. You're going to hear from Mr. Nick Shalon later. I would actually encourage you all to ask him that question. Not trying to, set him up or anything, but he's one of the things we are leveraging heavily is the Cloud One, Platform One, Data One activities that Mr. Nick Shalon and the good folks up at Hanscom are supporting. That program office under General Gunny Schmidt. He's all in. He recognizes we need to provide this capability to the enterprise. And we fully intend to leverage that. What we'd like to do is get to a place where that or some model similar to that can act as the tech stack that the government owns, that the contractors and industry has access to. That's the vision. That's clearly the vision where we're going. There's a lot of challenges that we've got to work through to realize that vision, but that's the path that we're on.
Okay, General Cooley, unfortunately we are at time, but we do have a minute or so if there's any thoughts that you would like to leave us with before we wrap up and go to break, sir. Okay,
first of all, again, huge thanks to you and the team for pulling this together. Conferences are like this are always very useful to have the important dialogue that we have. Unfortunately, at least my experience has been that much of the value of conferences is in those sidebar conversations during the break when you can have dialogues with folks. During COVID, that we're just going to have to find new ways to do that. But I want to just thank you for pulling this together to have this important dialogue. I would just go back to those three things. My ask of all of you, the three things that I hit on, which is lean in, learn, and leverage. It's just going to be absolutely essential. This is hard to change culture. It's going to be a journey, but we're never going to get there unless we do those three things. And I think we can do this pretty, I'm an optimist, pretty rapidly if we all can do that. If we lean in, we recognize this is about our shared national security, and we have got to go find ways to move out faster. And it's very clear across the Air Force that moving towards this digital capability is central to us achieving that goal. Resourcing it, getting all the things in place, that's going to be a challenge, but that is the journey we're on, and industry is a huge part of that. So with that, hey, thank you, Tim. I appreciate the time, and opportunity to speak to the AFCEA chapter. I'm a big fan of AFCEA and the important work that you do, and these kinds of organizations really do help to make sure that we have the crosstalk and the opportunity to share, because this is about an ecosystem, and we're all part of the same ecosystem. We have shared interest in terms of the national security, and so I think we have a path. We've just got to execute. Thanks so much, Tim.
Great. Thank you very much, sir. Well, what a great start to the WITS 2020 conference. So with that, we're really appreciative of Major General Cooley taking time out and for your attention during this process.